Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. I have to tell you, gentlemen, that yesterday, oh my gosh, I was just so sad. I was devastated. And, you just brought up a great point, Morgan. How do we converse about this? How are we able to get to a point of solutions and make this world a better place? And there's part of me that I just throw my hands up and I say, I give up. Yeah. I give up. Yeah. I have no hope for adults. But then I think about kids. They don't deserve any of this.
Right.
My children, obviously I have a baby. One of them's an infant, but they don't know skin color. That's not something that they know anything about. And they shouldn't have to deal with this.
Well, I think we've all got to be so careful about being drawn into this conflict because, one of the things that appears to me is that there is an effort to divide and conquer our country. That seems clear to me that these protests have some kind of planning behind them. I'm not saying the entire incident was planned long ago, but who knows, right? Stranger things have happened than that protests have been created and riots have been created in various countries. We've done that ourselves in other countries to destabilize them. But, some of the interesting things that I've heard about and seen about with some videos, which is, a lot of these peaceful protesters will be in certain areas and they'll say, wait a minute, why is there a pallet of bricks on this street? Because there's no construction going on. Have you seen the videos, Pat? You gave me a surprise look there.
I've not seen that.
Okay,
these showing up?
Yeah, there have been pallets of bricks on these streets in these really high-end retail areas where there's no ongoing construction. Somebody has dropped off pallets of bricks.
With a forklift.
With a truck. These didn't come off a pickup truck. It would be too much weight for a pickup truck. So somebody's brought in bricks for these protests, just like somebody's brought in water and food and these supply stations and everything else. Somebody's paid for the bus tickets, the plane tickets to ship these people from all around the country. What's going on here is the terrorist organization Antifa has mobilized, and they've taken over this situation to, again, try and drive a wedge between people, try and divide and conquer. And who's behind Antifa ultimately? We don't know, but, look at people like George Soros and look at his style of taking countries down and funding this divide and conquer strategy. And is that what we're seeing here? Are we really seeing this idea that there is, this thing that happened with George Floyd where he was murdered on the sidewalk, has now turned into something else? And now it's not really about that anymore. It's about trying to create racial division in this country. And all you got to do is watch the news and listen to what some of these commentators were saying. We had some clips. We really don't have time to play them all. And some of them are pretty offensive. But, there's clear statements coming out from what are, commentators and authority figures that are trying to drive a wedge between black people and white people in this country. They're saying all white people are bad or all white people are racist or silence is violence. That is just not true. All the people that I talk to, white and black, are all horrified by what happened to George Floyd. Horrified. People, and they can't process why didn't the other police officers pull him off of his neck? But this situation is being taken and it's being used for other purposes. And you made a point at the beginning, Pat George, which is, does anybody remember coronavirus? Well, before that, does anybody remember impeachment? Well, before that, does anybody remember Russia? The media has a habit of just changing our attention, and they're sort of directing us. There used to be an old saying that, a man is the head of the household or head of the relationship, but a woman is the neck. And that was something women used to say, well, and men too, but, it was kind of like, haha, yeah, the man's in charge, but I tell the man what to look at. So he's in charge, but I actually kind of am in charge. And that's cool. That probably is true. I don't know. I don't have a neck right now, so I don't know. But let's say that's true. Well, the media is our neck. They're sort of swiveling us around. Oh, look at this over here. Or look at that over there. And we've got all of these cities burning. We've got all this destruction of monuments, of buildings. We've got all this vandalism.
U.S. Embassy in London this morning.
Yeah, it's out of control. But this is a widespread. This is a criminal conspiracy that's going on right now, I believe. The planning is too good. The funding is too good. And, Attorney General William Barr came out on Saturday, and I hope we see this, and I think we will start to see this week. I think we're going to see, because we know who the leadership of Antifa is, and we know who the funding sources are. And with all the tracking that we can do through the smart devices, we can get to all that information. So I hope that the Department of Justice starts to act on this quickly. We've got to quell these riots. And like I said, it's important. It's so important that we make distinctions. I mean, there are legitimate protests. There are legitimate reasons to protest. People are constitutionally, they have a right to assemble to petition the government for a redress of their grievances. So that's interpreted to mean they have a right to these public assemblies for protest. And as long as they're nonviolent, I'm all for it. I think that's important. And that's a message that needs to get out there. But what happens is usually late at night, the protesters go home and there's a core group of rioters that show up. And they're the ones that are causing a lot of the trouble. And they're criminal opportunists. And they're also people who are communist revolutionaries who want to take down the system, who want to burn the country down for the sake of building a new country. You can read in their writings, you can read about this. But Attorney General Barr came out on Saturday, and this wasn't covered widely, but I'd like to play for you his statement because I think it's indicative. He's not a man given to a lot of hyperbole. If you notice, he's sort of understated in the way he talks about things. But I think we're going to start to see criminal enforcement done by the Department of Justice this week against the Antifa leadership and the funding sources throughout the country and throughout the world.
Good afternoon. The greatness of our nation comes from our commitment to the rule of law. The outrage of our national community about what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis is real and legitimate. Accountability for his death must be addressed and is being addressed through the regular process of our criminal justice system, both at the state and at the federal level. That system is working and moving at exceptional speed. Already, initial charges have been filed by the state. That process continues to move forward, and justice will be served. Unfortunately, with the rioting that is occurring in many of our cities around the country, the voices of peaceful protest are being hijacked by violent radical elements. Groups of outside radicals and agitators are exploiting the situation to pursue their own separate and violent agenda. In many places, it appears the violence is planned, organized, and driven by anarchic and left extremist groups, far left extremist groups, using Antifa-like tactics, many of whom travel from outside the state to promote the violence. We must have law and order on our streets and in our communities, and it is the responsibility of the local and state leadership in the first instance to halt this violence. The Department of Justice, including the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the ATF, the DEA, and our 93 United States Attorney's Office, U.S. Attorney's offices around the country, are supporting these local efforts. We'll continue to support them and take all action necessary to enforce federal law. In that regard, it is a federal crime to cross state lines or to use interstate facilities to incite or participate in violent rioting, and we will enforce those laws. Thank you.
So that was his statement. And, I think it's important that we recognize he's not nobody is minimizing what happened to George Floyd. He said the people who are upset about that is legitimate to be upset about what happened to George Floyd. And that's how everybody that I've spoken to feels strongly. I've yet to run into a person who said, something about Floyd that other than what happened to him is terrible, and those police officers need to be held accountable for that through the process. But again, we've got to separate that from the rioters. We've got to separate that from the people who, long before anything happened to George Floyd, they had a value system that they want to destroy this country because in their mind the capitalist system is evil, this country is evil, and they want to bring it down through violent revolution. And these people, they're real people. These are the people, the fist, that's like I forget the young man's name at Parkland, but how he did his fist, this is the symbolism of the radical, if we want to call it the radical left, radical communists, the ones who want to incite some kind of revolution in this country. And they're very good at propaganda. They're good at naming groups. So they've named a group Black Lives Matter. But, that's actually a group that's involved in some of these issues. That is actually a revolutionary type group. Now, it's hard because they're so good at naming, they're so good at manipulating us. You can't be against that, right? And I don't think anybody is against that, Black Lives Matter. Now, we need to have a discussion about how we pursue that. That we try to fix our existing system and we stop these things like what's happened to George Floyd from happening again. But we'll never be able to eliminate it totally. Let's face it, the system is full of people and people are flawed. And sometimes they behave in ways that, the rest of us wish that they didn't. And that's going to keep happening. And, of course, like the point I made earlier, tried to make, and I think this is one that you need to look into, and that is that this isn't limited to the black community. Police brutality is not limited to the black community. Now, I don't believe that police brutality is one of the great overarching problems that our society is facing in terms of overall magnitude. I think it's there, but I don't think it's as big as some of the other problems that we have to deal with. That doesn't mean we don't have to deal with it, right? It doesn't mean it's not wrong. It's just, is that the primary driving force of all of our civic thought, is we've got to eliminate police brutality. But I wanted to bring to you a story that wasn't much reported on at the time and still isn't much reported on today, and that is the story of Tony Timpa, who was a mentally ill man in Dallas who called the police, and the police, he was a white man, and the police came out, and they wound up arresting him, putting him on the ground. He had both his hands behind his back in zip ties. He had his legs zip tied, and they proceeded to sit with their knee in the middle of his back and hold him down, and literally, and he was saying the same things that George Floyd was saying, I can't breathe. And literally, they suffocated him on the ground. He died there. And there's currently an ongoing federal lawsuit. The only reason we know about this is as part of that lawsuit, because this happened back in 2016, but as part of that lawsuit, just last summer, the federal court ordered that the police body cams be released, and in those you could very clearly see them suffocate Tony Timpa on the ground in Dallas. And he wasn't even thought to have done anything wrong or committed a crime. He's the one that called the police. Think about that. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.